Hello, everybody out listening somewhere in ParenTween Connection land. We are back with our next conversation for our ParenTween Connection Talks podcast. Wow, can you tell I haven't talked a lot today? But what we're starting to do is to actually broadcast our podcast interviews live into our Facebook group, our YouTube channel, and to LinkedIn as well. So if you are in our Facebook group, pop on over and ask questions because I'm guessing there's going to be a fair number of them. Adrienne Bishop is one of our trusted experts, and she specializes as a parent coach in working with highly sensitive parents of highly sensitive kids. So let's start there, and then we'll get into the actual meat and potatoes of why we get triggered, just so that people understand what you do and how you do it or why you do it.
Yeah. So I work one-on-one with parents of kids that are, more emotional. They have more intense emotions, and they might not really respond well to a lot of traditional parenting tools like rewards and punishment. And then also usually there's a parent or two that are also emotional and sensitive. And so it tends to be very hard for them to manage their emotions around their child, even more difficult, right? Because they're already overwhelmed, they're overstimulated. Then their kids also having a lot more intense emotional situations. So the combination tends to be challenging. So that's the population that I focus on, although I do work with anyone, any parent.
Okay. I've long joked, I actually was just at dinner with family last week, and, Joe and I don't have kids, but we have nieces and nephews, and we've worked with kids for a long time. And our niece asked us, like, how come you guys don't have kids? And I was like, honestly, because I feel like it'd be a rotten mom, because I'm super emotional. I remember as a kid, my mom always told me that I cared too much and that I just needed to not respond. You have to get your emotions under control, I remember her saying. And I remember thinking, like, well, if I knew how to do this, don't you think I would?
Right. Exactly. Nobody likes to be out of control. Like, it's not fun.
Well, and then, like, you hear it, in partnerships where, frequently, if we're talking heteronormative, if the husband tells the wife to calm down, like, never in the history of ever has telling her to calm down actually succeeded in helping her calm down.
Like, oh, right? Thank you so much for that. I feel so much better now.
So one of the things that I love chatting about with you and with parent coaches, with teen coaches, is that so much of what we end up talking about is human relations in many ways.
Yep.
But you really focus on it, in your case, from parent to child. And so I imagine that a lot of this, our talk today is, why does my tween's behavior trigger me? I bet we could translate to, why does my partner's behavior trigger me? Why does my parents' behavior, like my own parents' behavior, trigger me, or my colleague, or my boss, or my subordinate, or the checkout person at the grocery store, or whatever? But so, like, fundamentally, what is it in this context with teenagers or tweens? Why are they so infuriating? Or I should say, why is their behavior so infuriating?
Yes. So there is one main answer. There's many, many, but the one main answer I do want to make sure we talk about is the idea that when our teen does something, or tween, that triggers us, usually we're taking it personally. Okay. So this is really, really common. We do this normally as humans. We make it about us. That's just what we do. And it's very, very just unconscious. It happens. And so when our teen says something, like, is snippy, right, and has like an attitude, we make it mean that, like, maybe they don't like us or they don't appreciate what we've done for them, right? So we really add all this meaning to what's happening in their world, which most likely is all about them. But for some, for natural human reasons, we interpret it to mean it's about us. It's something about us. And again, it's a reaction. It's not something we're consciously doing. So we really want to pay attention and have awareness around, when am I doing this? When am I making this about me? Even subconsciously, and being defensive around it, getting defensive around it too.
Well, and I can definitely see that. I know I've had experiences in the last however long that, when I've been at my lowest and I talked to my husband about it, he's like, you have to stop taking it so personally. You have to stop taking it so personally. And, like, on my end, I don't feel like I'm taking it personally. I'm like, but this other person did.
Right. Yep.
Right.
Yep. Yep.
That's not the way to do things.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
and it's very easy.
And so how do we switch that? Like, because I don't want to get into the details of the situation and derail the conversation, but this person didn't call, didn't text, whatever the case may be, or said this, said that, did this, like these are the facts. So where is it between they haven't texted me in 5 days, or they haven't done their chores, or whatever the case may be? Where in there are we making the leap between this is what happened and making it personal?
Yes. Okay. So typically what I do is I work with my clients using something called the thought model, and you just kind of set me up to explain the thought model, which is awesome. So
I set them up, you knocked them down, Adrienne.
Yeah, that's right. So the circumstance is what you just mentioned, your teen's behavior, your parents texting you, something that bothers you, which was what my client just dealt with. And it triggers, it feels very like, it doesn't feel good at all. It feels like you want to fight, you're going to get defensive. And where that stems from is the next part of the model, which first you have circumstance, the next part is your thought. Then comes your feeling, then comes your action, then comes your result. So the second line being your thought, that's where you want to start. You want to start with what's happening in that line. So like I mentioned before, when my teen, has attitude, I think they're not grateful. They're entitled. They're being rude or whatever, like whatever it feels like, they don't appreciate me, right? They should be respecting me. That is a big one. That is a huge one. Any of that is going to cause a feeling of anger, frustration, defensiveness, annoyance, irritation. And then guess what? The model tells us that your feelings drive your action. So whatever you feel is going to create your next step, which is to yell, to defend yourself, to, be rude back, whatever it is. Not necessarily all the time, but that's usually what happens when it comes to those feelings, right?
Right.
And then your result is that you just don't ever really understand like where your child is coming from, like what's happening with them. So you miss the whole boat of really getting yourself in a place where you can actually solve what's happening. Instead, we're just reacting to it, which is then creating probably more problems, or nothing changes essentially. So you want to move to a different thought, because your circumstance of your teen or tween saying things, doing things, being a certain way is neutral. It is neither good nor bad until we have a thought about it, right? And so this is like most of the reasons that we feel triggered by our kids, but there are a couple more, and I'll talk about that in a second.
Sure.
But, so what we want to do is say to ourselves, okay, how do I want to feel? How do I want to feel? Well, I want to maybe feel like compassionate for this kid, which is a leap for some people, right? To feel compassionate for their tween. That is acting the way they're acting because they're probably struggling most of the time. That's like, you can pretty much assume that if anyone is saying things that are rude, disrespectful, angry, it's because they're struggling with something internally. So we can go to compassion, like, that must be really hard for them to deal with what they're dealing with. But one of my favorite thoughts that's a little easier is, this is not about me. So we can always go to that one as a backup, right? Because that one's more accessible to most people. Like, or it's possible this is not about me is one of my other ones I go to, because it feels easier to get to. So when you think it's possible it's not about me, that leads you to usually be curious, or to at least be neutral about it. And then when you're curious or neutral, then you think, okay, I wonder what's going on with them, why they would do that. And as soon as we figure out, as soon as we get to that place, we can figure out what the cause is. We can actually address what the hell's going on with the kid, right? So that we're like actually resolving it, as opposed to just, again, creating no change. And so, so we do need to get to that place of neutrality, I feel, is the most efficient way to solve those challenges. And then, of course, you have a teen that's most likely going to fight you back if you fight them. And so we don't want to necessarily get into those arguments. We want to end them. We want to stop them in their tracks before they even start. And going into this place stops things in their tracks pretty quickly.
Right.
So, that would be my first recommendation. And then unless you want to interrupt, I can go.
No, I was just going to say, I was going to kind of summarize. You're like, okay, we have the facts or the circumstances, like you said, that then leads us to have a thought about it. And even just going, hey, it's possible that it's not actually about me, or it's not all about me.
Correct.
Or maybe, I know sometimes it can be hard to bridge the gap all the way over to it's not about me at all. So I like the fact that you offered those as in-betweens.
Right. Exactly. Yes. And then you can even say, I wonder if it is possible that it's not about me and it's about them. I wonder what's going on with them. Like getting into that curiosity is the next step, right?
And I was going to say, that almost feels like it's a lead in to, I know you and I have talked about our foundations of connection, of challenging your truths, right?
Correct.
Okay, here are the truths. But if those are just the facts, where am I putting meaning in between? Because I have to believe something. There has to be something underlying there. If there's a feeling, you don't go from circumstance to feeling without a thought underneath.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Unless it's a conditioned response, which I will talk about in a minute. But yes, so when you have that thought in there, you do want to recognize that it's a choice, though, most of the time, not all the time, but like a lot of these initial meaning that you add to what your teen or tween is doing is a choice. And so if we can just like catch ourselves and just have the awareness of, oh my gosh, that's where I'm going here. It's not helping me. I don't want to feel that way anymore. That can help us then to say, okay, so how do I want to feel? Where do I want to go? Oh, maybe I do want to experiment with, like, what if I do think something like it's possible this is not about me? How does that feel in my body? And just getting that, does it feel true? Because you're right. We need to have a truth in there, and we got to make sure it feels true to us. We can't just have a mantra that doesn't, like toxic positivity mantra, that doesn't actually resonate. It's not going to work. Right. So it has to feel in our bodies good. And I really like it's possible this is not about me, because it feels accessible. But it's also another one that you could go to is like, this isn't a problem, or nothing has gone wrong here, right? Because our brain thinks, oh my God, my teen is rude. Everything has gone wrong with the world. Like, it's going to come crashing down. Also, they're going to be homeless, and, they're never going to have a good life because they're rude in this one moment. So just kind of recognizing, like, when your brain's making a lot of meaning over a small thing or one situation, just catching yourself in there. So where is that truth? What is that truth for you? What feels good to you and what resonates?
Especially if you have a tendency toward catastrophizing, i.e. 100%. My child was rude and they're going to be a bum on the street. Like that's a really, like that's bigger than the Grand Canyon.
Yeah. And it's actually very common. Like that's not that abnormal to go there. Or like they are going to be rude to everyone, and that means they're going to be lonely, right? No one will ever love them. That's actually something that I've heard my clients say, and it's normal, because that's what our brain's supposed to do. It's supposed to create solutions to really scary problems. But we don't really have a scary problem here, right? It's not as big as it's making it. Our brain is making it, but because we don't have a lot of survival issues anymore, it's much more emotional, that we're, emotional danger instead of physical danger. Our brain is just like overreacting to some of these things. So we have to catch it, rein it in. So one of the other things is like I was mentioning, the trigger, missing the thought, skipping the thought. And that is a new tool that I have been working with, actually. And what it is more of a conditioned response, a program that's happening automatically for you. So sometimes we can catch our thought and we can change it and we can move forward from there, and we can practice it and it becomes pattern and habit. But sometimes it's just not getting resolved. And I have clients who have made tons and tons of progress by changing their thinking, understanding where their kids are coming from, solving the problems that are the underneath cause. And then there's this one thing that they just can't get away from, and they can't stop getting triggered by. And that's when it becomes, okay, this is something that's deeper and more programmed. And it's just, you're jumping directly from this happens, I feel this way. So when that is the case, you really want to make sure that you're getting the tools to move you from automatically reacting to something. So let's say, my last client was talking about how her mom is always texting her things like, can we talk? Or we need to talk. And for some reason, that's a trigger for her, because she thinks something terrible has happened. So she goes into panic. Well, it's now translating to her kids. So her kids are now needing her for something, and her brain goes to panic, because this is what she's been kind of, trained to think or feel. So now she's panicking every time her kid wants her, when she doesn't want to be on call for them all the time. She wants to say, no, I'm not available, but the panic is happening. So we worked on her trigger response to these specific things in her child's life that were happening. But they were coming from this old conditions response. But because you're able to bypass the thoughts, you can break that pathway. And so no longer, if, through these visualizations that I do with my clients, no longer are you connecting panic to your kid coming and asking you
Mhm.
if you can help them with something.
Mhm.
It's now broken. And then we add in, okay, let's move into a different feeling. We access that feeling, feel it now in the moment. And then we actually bring back that situation and paste it on that old situation. So when
Mhm.
the kid comes and asks you to, see them or to help
Mhm.
them, you're
Right.
not immediately panicked. And then you feel like you
Right.
have to do it.
Right.
So it just gives you back that control over those automatic reactions where before it feels very out of control. It feels very much like you
Right.
don't have any way to manage it at all.
And the way that I've come to recognize that in my world, I remember one of the first life coaches I ever worked with used the description that a trigger is kind of like or not the trigger. We all have like these like washcloths or rags, that are soaked in gasoline.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the conditioning that you've been talking about, right? Like we've had these series of experiences that have led us to this point that this is now a gasoline soaked rag, and somebody else's behavior can be the spark that turns that gasoline soaked rag into this like conflagration, right? Like just this big thing. And I've seen that happen in myself where something happened. I just had this reaction that was so in my gut, so visceral, so like, and I recognized it was irrational. And so I imagine this is, often what you're talking about, right? Like my mom just wanted to talk to me, or my kid just needs my help. And I'm like blowing off like Mount Vesuvius or something, and like recognizing that the reaction doesn't necessarily fit the situation, and or it's so crippling or debilitating. I guess, I mean, that's what it was for me, of just like I couldn't function when I felt that way. So recognizing that is the first step, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. It's like the flight or fight response. That's what most likely you're experiencing. Yeah. And so just like, and then we do, where else are you feeling panicked? Let's figure out those other places that it's happening. And then we do the same thing again and visualize through and change how we feel about those pieces. And then it's so amazing because the next time, like I've had a client go through this process and she like emailed me and was like, I literally was calm. Like he did the same thing that he's been doing, and I did not feel triggered. Like I felt calm, and it's just happens that those neural pathways are gone. So then you have the new one, and it stays that way. So you don't have to do anything. There's no willpower there. There's no like managing what you're thinking. It's just happening automatically, which is so nice because, just having both tools creates this opportunity for parents that I work with to be able to like just have this ease in getting to neutral as much as they want, as much as they want, which is, and what is humanly possible because it's not 100%, but just knowing that there's like all these different places that we can go to kind of work on this one's piece. And then they can feel like, okay, I can respond now. I don't have to be in panic mode. I don't have to be in fight or fight. I can just, respond the way I want to.
Right.
And it's
like
really,
a calm,
really
rational
powerful.
adult.
Right. Which is hard, like to get there. It's not always the easiest thing. Which is one of the reasons why I'm like, that's why can you see like the parallel between our kids and, it's work for us too. So it's, one of those things, but so it's just really nice. I had a client whose kid was like yelling stop in her face sometimes, when she would talk to him about something. And so we did it on that. And I mean, that's a triggering experience for most people to have somebody yell in your face. And she completely was like, I felt fine. I didn't have that like, resistant feeling come up. It was just kind of like neutral. It was like nothing. And it's just really cool. It's just really awesome. So that's kind of the summary of the triggering experience.
Well, and like I said, so much of it seems like it can translate, and yes, obviously here at ParenTween and in the work that you do, we're focused on the parent-kid relationship, but it works in so many other directions.
Oh yeah.
And it's, I always say to folks, like, look, at the end of the day, the only person that you can ever actually control is yourself.
Yeah.
So we can sit there and we can blame our kids for this, that, or the other thing, but blaming them or yelling at them or praising them or whatever isn't going to change our responses to the situation. So if the situation isn't going to change, how can we change our response to it?
Yeah. And also I always say, like, basically when you go down to the underneath reason why we want our kids or anyone in our life to be different or to change is because we think that's going to make us feel better. That's like 100% the reason. We want to feel better. And that's how naturally humans operate. This person needs to change, I'll feel better. This person needs to change, I'll feel better. That's just how we operate. It's totally fine and normal, but we don't have control over that. So then we're just fighting the system basically that doesn't work and creating more suffering for us by trying to change others. And so by having the control that these tools give you to change yourself, then you actually have control and you have a place to go. And you can create your own feelings in whatever way it looks for you. You have that power. I don't need anyone to be a certain way for me to feel how I want to feel. You know, in most cases, obviously. So yeah, so I think that that's so empowering for parents to have those options.
Awesome. All right. Well, we are going to go ahead and wrap up. Adrienne, thank you again for joining us.
Yes.
And for folks who've listened in, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel or follow us on LinkedIn or on Facebook. And to connect with Adrienne directly, she is at Adrienne, ADRIENNE, for anyone who's listening and doesn't see it on the visual, if you're not watching it, AdrienneBishopCoaching.com. Thank you, Adrienne.
Thank you for having me.